The following podcast is a presentation of This Is Infamous. Listener discretion is advised.
Thanks for tuning in, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to a special Backlash edition of Intelligent Wrestling Conversation. I'm your host, as always, Billy Donnelly, who you can find at thisisinfamous.com. And this is the wrestling podcast that takes logic, reasoning, perspective, and context, and of course, intelligence, and injects it into the dialogue about the professional wrestling that we know and love. What we've been doing since the brand extension, the brand split in the WWE now, coming out of SummerSlam, because there's just so much wrestling content to discuss, is we've taken during pay-per-view / special event times to add extra episodes to break down those particular cards. Otherwise, it's just too much to discuss, too much to talk about. So anytime there is a WWE pay-per-view, you can expect an additional episode of the IWC to come to you. And this week, that will be no different, as I'll be bringing you this very special edition of the show to talk about the WWE Backlash pay-per-view. Plenty of things to talk about in wrestling will be here later in the week. Expect another show to talk about the fallout on Raw and on SmackDown. We'll also talk about Delete or Decay, as well as CM Punk's debut in the UFC. So all of that on tap for later this week in full-blown detail. But what we're going to do on this particular show, as I mentioned at the top, is talk about nothing but WWE Backlash. Now, overall, I'll give you my overall thoughts first, and then we can get into some detail. Break it down one by one, match by match, event by event on the card, to give you a full understanding of my feelings on what the WWE put forth as the first full-blown SmackDown pay-per-view since the brand split. Something that had been done many, many years ago as part of the first brand split, which, as we all know, didn't quite work out. But Backlash here, the first additional pay-per-view added to the calendar that would just be SmackDown only. Now, later in the month, we're going to get a Raw only pay-per-view with the resurrection of Clash of Champions. And as we all know, Raw is the more star-powered show, I would say. So it was interesting to have SmackDown come out of the gate as the first, in the hopes of seeing this roster be able to sort of carry its own show from beginning to end. Now, I think the SmackDown Live shows have been getting better since the draft. With that said, I think there's also been some wasted opportunity. I think there's been some real high points. And then there's also been some wasted opportunities. I think in 2 hours, you have the potential for a very tight show. But with that said, at only 2 hours, you are still smushing a lot with that missing hour that Raw has at its benefit, or its detriment at times, to really fully develop your characters and your storyline. So as a result, you're trying to smush 6 women into a storyline to crown your first ever SmackDown Women's Champion. You're trying to breeze through a tag team tournament to crown those champions. You're still trying to build interest in the WWE World Heavyweight Championship. You're also trying to build interest in the Intercontinental Championship. And even with those 4 titles, just on the one brand, you're still trying to build up the mid-card, the upper mid-card, the bottom of the card, so that you have a wealth of talent that you can build the SmackDown brand around. Because let's face it, the SmackDown brand, while I think is talented and maybe has a little bit more depth than Raw does, also features, and I don't mean this to sound as a negative, but sort of cast-offs in the WWE. Talent that had been damaged or underappreciated or underutilized, who are now getting an opportunity to shine, a little bit more of a chance to showcase what was missed when the boat passed them by the last time, or originally. Now, that's typically what happened the last time in the brand split, which is also partially why it didn't work, was that one show was treated as the cream of the crop, the creme de la creme, so to speak, and the other was clearly not an equal. And so with Raw and SmackDown in the past, you had Raw, which was the A show, as everybody knew it, and SmackDown was the B show, where you had talent who was very good, but wasn't necessarily good enough to carry the company as the face of Raw. Or talent that the company was behind, but not really behind. Which is where you got opportunities for people like Daniel Bryan and Dolph Ziggler and Alberto Del Rio at the moment. Because once the brand split ended, they were sort of left in limbo, with the exception of Daniel Bryan, who managed to sort of push through, with the audience really making them take notice. So, with that said, now I was interested to see how SmackDown would perform on its own, not only just on a weekly basis, but also when it came to pay-per-views. Would they have enough to sort of fill out their pay-per-view cards, make them compelling watches, give you a reason to tune into another 3 hours and change when you factor in the pre-show every several months? I think there's 19 pay-per-views in total now during a calendar year in the WWE. So for months when probably around WrestleMania and the Royal Rumble and SummerSlam, I would imagine even the Survivor Series, you may get joint cards. Probably the majors, as we like to call them, is when you'll get joint cards, Raw and SmackDown, separate but together. So Raw versus Raw, SmackDown versus SmackDown, no real crossover, but you'll have those brands together in sort of a super show pay-per-view of sorts. And the rest of the time, we'll get these individuals. So would SmackDown be able to create something, knowing that they don't have the main event talent that Raw does to a degree? I mean, you still have John Cena, you still have AJ Styles, you still have WWE World Champion Dean Ambrose. You have a number of those talents on SmackDown. It's just as you move further down is where you start to see a bit of a drop-off. There's no New Day here. There's no Enzo and Big Cass, Kevin Owens, Sami Zayn, Sasha Banks, Charlotte. Still very talented individuals on SmackDown, but they lack the marquee value, I guess. So, coming into Backlash, would SmackDown be able to create enough throughout a given night to make what they put forth in a pay-per-view feel special? Now, I thought there were a number of things that SmackDown had done fairly well leading into the pay-per-view. I like what they've done with the Usos as of late. I like what they've done with AJ Styles as of late. I like what they've done with Dolph Ziggler as of late. So there are some positive. I love what they're doing with Heath Slater to a point. Mostly by giving him time and putting some effort into allowing Heath Slater to be something rather than just a joke. So there has been some upside to what SmackDown Live has been doing. And so I was interested to see how it would shake out for Backlash. Now, I guess what we'll do for this particular event is we'll start and work our way backwards. The big important stuff first, and then we'll work our way throughout the card rather than show how the card was built. Because in this case, I don't necessarily know, like SummerSlam, which I thought was just booked horrendously. I don't know necessarily that the booking and how the card was laid out really had an effect on my feelings of how Backlash played for me. I will say this. The crowd there in Richmond, I believe, was horrible. Completely indifferent. And I said this a few weeks ago, talking about a Monday Night Raw, how much difference there is in watching it at home when the crowd, the live participating audience, is into what they're seeing as opposed to when they're sitting on their hands and feeling indifferent. Because the enthusiasm is infectious. The enthusiasm with a crowd that is absolutely buying into what they're seeing translates through your TV and infects you watching it on your couch. You also become excited. You feel it. It's palpable. When you notice the people who are there, paid good money, took time to drive to the arena, sit down, get dressed, the whole nine, and they're just don't seem to care. It sort of bums you out when you're watching on the couch, and it can affect sort of the match, because as you're watching, you go, why is nobody into this? And I thought the crowd there in Richmond was just horrendous. Other than probably two matches. Even then, one of the matches is probably just half of the match. The crowd was just seemed to be out of it. Just a very lackluster, uninspired crowd. And I thought it really came across in how Backlash ultimately was presented. Furthermore, as the card did sort of play out, Backlash didn't really feel all that special. And it's odd because when you look at it on paper, there were a number of things that they had set up that were meant to make the card feel special. Crowning of the first ever SmackDown Women's Champion should feel monumental. Crowning of the first ever SmackDown Tag Team Champions should feel important, should feel monumental. Match for the WWE World Championship between Dean Ambrose and AJ Styles. An Intercontinental title defense between The Miz and Dolph Ziggler. Titles on the line. Every single SmackDown title going to be decided. And yet, even with a number of things that I thought they did strongly going into the card, as I'm watching it, Backlash felt very much like a glorified house show. Like a house show where they, maybe a televised house show, like a house show where they bring out the lights and maybe a slightly fancier entrance ramp. Because I've been to house shows before, and the mood there is relatively tame, as opposed to what would normally feel like a televised event or a pay-per-view. And so the vibe that I got throughout most of Backlash, even as the important things were happening, felt very tame, unepic, matter of fact. And that says nothing about what I thought was outstanding commentary as usual by Mauro Ranallo, who always does his best to sell, sometimes oversell, what's happening in the ring. But there just seemed to be a lack of enthusiasm elsewhere for what was happening. Nothing about the presentation of Backlash felt important. Felt great. It just felt like it was there. And as a result, I think it really affected the way I watched this thing. Because nothing that happened felt anywhere near as heart-pumping as, say, Kevin Owens being crowned the Universal Champion on Monday Night Raw just a couple of weeks ago. Or Finn Balor winning the Universal Championship at SummerSlam. For some reason, there's a very chill vibe going on with SmackDown right now, and I don't know that it's to its benefit. And I think it's ultimately detrimental to your brand when, as people watch the shows, they don't really feel anything, even when major moments are transpiring. So, for example, let's get into it. Because, like I said, 4 titles on the line. So we'll start with the main event, with Dean Ambrose defending the WWE World Championship against the new face that runs the place, the man who defeated John Cena in the match of the night at SummerSlam, the phenomenal one, AJ Styles. Overall, a pretty solid match. AJ Styles is truly phenomenal. And I know it took him a long road to get to the WWE, but now that he is there, easily one of the best all-around talents they have stepping through those ropes night after night. Easily up there. The type of talent that you want to help carry your company. Now, Dean Ambrose can bring it. In ring, I think he's still missing something. Entertaining as hell, but when it comes to matches like this, I feel like his repertoire has been somewhat limited over time to the point of repetitiveness. Doesn't feel like there's always something fresh. Sort of a Dean Ambrose match feels very much cookie cutter at times. Feels like we're getting the same moves in the same sequence at the same times throughout. And I'm not gonna hit him with some sort of 5 moves of doom criticism, but it just feels like each new match isn't always trying to top the last match. Surpass it in some new way. Give us something new to be sort of dazzled by or amazed with. AJ Styles, on the other hand, is adaptive. That guy is capable of putting on a match of the night candidate with John Cena as much as Roman Reigns. Because that's just the way he is. He sells remarkably well. But he's versatile. He can be a high flyer and a risk taker. He can be a grappler. He can be a wrestler. He can be a brawler. He can be whatever it is that you need him to be for his style to make the match against whoever it is that you stick him in the ring with. And so I thought the match with Ambrose and Styles was overall a pretty solid match. Started to build throughout. Crowd was really slow to embrace it, as they were basically everything throughout the night following the opening women's match, which we'll get to in a few minutes. But it really wasn't until towards the end where they started to build a little bit. Now we get to the finish. With a ref bump. AJ Styles seeing this, taking advantage of it, hitting Dean Ambrose with a kick to the groin, a low blow mirroring how we ended the go-home SmackDown Live heading into this, which was AJ Styles taking a cheap shot at the champion. Transitioning that into a Styles clash. Covering the shoulders for a count of 3. And becoming the new WWE World Champion. When you think about it, pretty remarkable. Pretty incredible. This is a man who debuted in the WWE in January at the Royal Rumble. This is the guy who lost his WrestleMania match against Chris Jericho. And this is a man who now kicks off September, 9 months after being introduced to the WWE Universe, and he is holding the most prestigious title in the company's history. The one held by Hulk Hogan and the Macho Man and the Ultimate Warrior, and Bret the Hitman Hart and Shawn Michaels and Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock and Triple H. AJ Styles. Who spent his time on the Indies and in Ring of Honor and in TNA, where he made his mark, and overseas in New Japan. That AJ Styles sits atop the WWE. Pretty incredible. Pretty incredible. And let's remember, this is a guy who for a long time, it seemed like the WWE just wasn't interested in what he brought to the table. Didn't really see him as a fit for their product. This is a guy who was committed to TNA for years. A big fish in that relatively small pond. And he is now the WWE World Champion. Now look, I hate to say that I told you this was coming. Who the hell am I kidding? I love it. I told you this was coming. Check back over recent episodes of this very podcast where I told you within a calendar year that both Kevin Owens and AJ Styles would be holding major singles titles in the WWE. Now, where I was wrong is I didn't expect it to all happen this soon. I don't necessarily know that the WWE had that planned either. As I'm sure Finn Balor was originally being granted a much longer reign with the Universal Championship than his injury allowed him. But I told you that their time was coming. That these two guys who were just so damn good would be recognized for their effort, for their hard work, for their sacrifice, for their ability to just get over because of how undisguisably good they are. You can't hide how good these guys are. You can't. Even if you tried, you can't. Because they take they make the most of whatever it is that they're given and they run with it. And these two guys have done that. And it is a remarkable time. As a wrestling fan, you should be thrilled about the stories of Kevin Owens and AJ Styles and the blood, sweat, and tears they have put into professional wrestling being rewarded at this moment in time as the two major singles champions in the WWE currently. And yet, oddly, even with that history happening here at Backlash in 2016, that moment of AJ Styles being the champion felt oddly underwhelming. And I think it's because of that awful crowd. It wasn't a crazy pop for him winning, and it also wasn't the silence of shock. It was a smattering of whatever the hell was going on there all night. Now, that doesn't mean I'm any less excited. I'm tremendously thrilled at the two heel champions carrying both brands into the future. Kevin Owens on Monday Night Raw, AJ Styles on SmackDown. And I think it is an incredible positive for the WWE. Excuse me. And a doubling down on the idea that there truly is a new era. These aren't the same old guys. These are well-traveled talents, but they're not the same old recycled guys we normally see through the WWE machine. This is a chance to put titles on fresh faces atop the brand and do something new. New feuds, new storylines, new interactions, new dynamic, just an overall new feel. And I think the quick ascent with AJ Styles, as well as within Kevin Owens, through the WWE operation, just speaks volumes about what it is the fan base wants. And how they just want some change. They want something refreshing. And these two guys represent that. Finn Balor represented that. Even Dean Ambrose represented that. All felt like off-the-radar choices for the WWE. But in the end, it was guys who got themselves over. Who worked hard to get themselves over. And earned the respect quickly of the WWE Universe to be thrust into this high position in the WWE. Now let me talk about the finish of the match. Because I've seen in some circles some hedging about how AJ Styles was booked. Oh, he cheated. It undermines his first title reign in the WWE. No, it doesn't. Everything that they did at the finish of that AJ Styles-Dean Ambrose match was foreshadowed in other elements leading up to Backlash. Like I said, the ref bump followed by the kick to the groin, the low blow, was mirroring the very final images that we got last Tuesday on SmackDown Live to lead into this very show. Of Dean Ambrose sort of not taking AJ Styles seriously, of sort of mocking him with his bowling trophy gift. Sort of discrediting his win over John Cena to a degree. And paying the price with a kick to the gonads. And here we saw the same thing. We saw AJ Styles take advantage by doing what it took to win, by breaking the rules, acting in heelish fashion in order to win and capture the title. That's what you should want your heel to do. The heel doesn't always have to win cleanly in order to sort of establish their place in the pecking order. A heel does what it takes to win, by hook or by crook. And that brings heat to your heel. That gets your fan base hating that individual because they took a shortcut or the easy way out, because they didn't win honorably. AJ Styles as a heel isn't supposed to win honorably. He's supposed to do whatever it takes to get his hand raised high in victory at the end of a match. And he did that. And as a result, this allows you to continue telling this story moving forward. It allows you to have Dean Ambrose as a sympathetic victim, wronged in the defense of his WWE World Championship, who must now seek vengeance and justice, as we covered on previous podcasts, which are key components for your babyface. Remember, this is a Dean Ambrose who thought he had it all locked up, all in the bag. Who saw AJ Styles as, yeah, a guy who beat John Cena, but a guy who wasn't going to beat Dean Ambrose. And maybe he took his opponent too lightly. Maybe he didn't fully embrace that AJ Styles might truly be phenomenal. And this offers him a path for redemption down the line to maybe recapture that title. But I thought what the storyline did, what their booking did, made sense for both of these individuals. Number one, get AJ Styles over as a cheating heel who gets some heat on him. And it makes your babyface sympathetic in his quest for justice. Totally fine with the outcome. Totally fine with the way they got there. Makes sense. It's logical. Tells an interesting story. And one that I'm curious to see where they go with next. So for that, well played by the WWE and their creative in Dean Ambrose and AJ Styles. All right, I want to shift gears now back to the beginning of the card. Where Backlash opened with the six-pack women's challenge to crown the first ever SmackDown women's champion. Now, I thought leading into this, it's sort of been a mess in the SmackDown women's division. The Raw division is clearly defined. You may be dealing with some injuries there, but clearly defined at the top end of the card there. Charlotte, Sasha Banks, now you got Bayley in there. You have a pretty clear picture of who you're building your women's division around. Nia Jax still on the rise. Alicia Fox popped her head in on Monday Night Raw. But at least you know who you're following. SmackDown, they're trying to make everybody work all at once. Because you're trying to establish this new women's division that may not be as dynamic as what Sasha and Charlotte and Bayley bring to the table. So even though you have Becky Lynch there, who I think they've done damage to in recent months, and a returning Nikki Bella, who I understand why she's a babyface coming back from injury, but I think she's a top flight heel that they really should double down on. You also have a number of fresh talent there that you need to try to establish. And I don't know that SmackDown has done that very well by just throwing them out there and not giving people an understanding of who they are, nor a reason why to care about them. So you have Alexa Bliss, you have Carmella, who are still just sort of getting their feet wet in the WWE universe amongst people who may not be familiar with what they did regularly down in NXT. As we've established, casual WWE watchers are not NXT watchers. There is a fraction of the WWE universe that does watch NXT, but it is nowhere near what they believe or wish or hope it was. And I don't know that they've done the legwork since those talents have been called up to get people to care about who they are or understand where they came from. Now, overall, look, I thought this was a really good match. Crowd was into it. Crowd was hot for this match right out of the gate. With Alexa Bliss and Natalya and Carmella and Nikki Bella and Becky Lynch battling it out for this title. And Naomi. Sorry, I felt like I missed one. Women worked hard here, and they got time to work, which is important for making a women's division on SmackDown meaningful. Is it different than what the women on Raw are doing? Very much so. It's a different style. It's a different pace. Different skill set than what Bailey and Sasha and Charlotte are doing on Monday Night Raw. It's different. It's very different. Those women are trying to steal the show. These women are trying to steal the show in their own respect. But they also understand that there are limitations to what they do. While Becky Lynch, I think, is top flight, the rest of the women on that roster can't quite do what the other three legs of the Four Horsewomen can do. That's not a knock against them. It just means they work differently. So you're not going to see some of the cringe-inducing, worrisome spots that you might see in Charlotte versus Sasha Banks. But that doesn't mean that they're not working hard to earn your respect by doing it just differently. There's different strokes for different folks. So I thought a really good match. That told an interesting story, particularly with the Carmelo Nikki Bella aspect forwarded. Even watching sort of the recap and the build-up that Carmella heel turn came out of nowhere. It really didn't mean much to people because they didn't really know who Carmella was to begin with. Realized it's done to sort of even out the sides, have 3 baby faces and 3 heels. But I thought Naomi did some solid work here. Becky Lynch, I think Carmella still needs a little work. I'm not always impressed with her in-ring work. I always thought she was better as sort of the valet to Enzo and Big Cass. I think she's still got a ways to go to sort of be more vicious. Alexa Bliss, I think, has made huge strides from her days in NXT as a heel persona. And I love the cotton candy Harley Quinn look we got at Backlash. Loved it. I want to see more of that. It helps her stand out even further. Makes her a much more colorful personality. To go along with her sort of Napoleonic complex attitude. In the end, Becky Lynch was the one who walked away as the first ever women's champion on SmackDown. A well-deserved honor. Very much like Bayley being called up to the main roster, or Sasha being crowned women's champion on Monday Night Raw leading into SummerSlam. Becky Lynch has had a journey. And as one of the four horsewomen who have helped put women's wrestling back on the map in the WWE, I thought sort of the right champion to help forward that cause on SmackDown. Now, it's going to be interesting to see who she works with moving forward, because I think Becky Lynch can do some pretty incredible things in the ring, but she also needs somebody opposite her to do it against. Once again, on Raw, you have women who have a tremendous chemistry with each other and who are always constantly raising the bar for one another to do something more dynamic, more magnificent, more amazing. On SmackDown, I don't know that you could do things like that. Naomi, incredibly athletic, but in terms of the wrestling is concerned, don't know that she's on that level. Carmella, not there. Alexa Bliss, not there. Nikki Bella, coming off of injury, definitely not there. Natalya has wrestling background, but I never felt I just never got that feel from her that she is on that level. Solid hand, but not on that level. So we'll see. I think they need to continue to reestablish these women's personalities to give people an emotional investment in each one of them. But a good match to start off the card. Nice nod for Becky Lynch to get that moment. Good start to the women's division here on SmackDown. You just got to keep building on it. Keep building on it. All right, I want to talk a little bit about the Randy Orton-Bray Wyatt match before I get into the tag team titles. Because leading into Backlash, word was circulating that there would no longer be a Randy Orton-Bray Wyatt match at Backlash. That Randy Orton was not medically cleared to compete at Backlash. And this isn't storyline talking, this is a shoot. That Randy Orton was still suffering from concussion-like symptoms following his match with Brock Lesnar at SummerSlam, most likely as a result of the elbows to the head he endured at the end of that match. And that as a result, he was not cleared for a match. They thought he would be in a position to be, and then at the last minute, didn't shake out the way they wanted it to. And as a result of that, well, they got to reschedule. Because he's been pushing this match the whole way through. So they do a backstage segment early in the card where Bray Wyatt attacks Randy Orton. No real reason given for it. Which I think also led to a lot of the confusion. And what we wound up with was Randy Orton forfeiting his match and Bray Wyatt ultimately defeating Randy Orton as a result of him being incapable to compete both in a shoot and in a work. Now, what that led to was a big gap in your card. Now, they elected to fill that with a no-holds-barred match between Bray Wyatt and Kane, once again sort of feeding into the house show feel of Backlash. Two guys who have no real connection to each other at the moment, but who are put into a match because, well, they need a match on the card, and these two guys happen to be now freely available. Now, doing a no-holds-barred match at least gets the crowd some level of excitement because there's plenty. Chairs and announce table spots. Some devastation. Which is always good for the wrestling fan's soul. Now, where the confusion really starts to set in is that they seem to now have this set up as a way for Bray Wyatt to score a impressive victory over Kane, in addition to his forfeit victory over Randy Orton. And now maybe you got a ruthless Bray Wyatt on your hands again. But the decision is made for Randy Orton to show up at the end of this match when Bray Wyatt seems to have things well in hand and deliver an RKO to the Eater of Worlds and essentially help gift Kane a win over Bray Wyatt. Now, what a win for Kane over Bray Wyatt, a win for Kane over Bray Wyatt does at this point is sort of head scratching. The last time we saw Kane, I mean, we did see Kane on SmackDown. He was delivering a choke slam to Fandango for shits and gigs, basically. That doesn't really help Bray Wyatt in any way. Bray Wyatt just showed how ruthless he can be by attacking Randy Orton backstage and getting a forfeit win without ever having to step foot inside the ring against the Viper. And now, even with Randy Orton getting involved, he still loses to Kane? I mean, does Kane really need a win? Or could Bray Wyatt maybe use that victory? Once again, wins and losses do count. So I thought the outcome, the booking, was rather confusing. But even more is that if Randy Orton is not medically cleared to compete in a match against Bray Wyatt, then how is Randy Orton medically cleared to even step foot in front of the WWE Universe, in front of that crowd, walk down the aisle, get into the ring, and deliver a wrestling move? In this case, the RKO. You know, if you're in the NFL and you get hit in the head and you have to go through concussion protocol, they don't allow the quarterback to come in back into the game because you need him for an important play. You're either in or you're out. If you have a concussion, you're out. If you're medically cleared, you're in. You can't be not medically cleared and then still participate. It's not how it works. And I thought this segment, outside of the booking itself, just led to a lot of questions, at least on my behalf, about the medical treatment of Randy Orton. Because once again, if indeed, as a shoot, Randy Orton was still suffering from concussion-like symptoms related to his Brock Lesnar match at SummerSlam, then Randy Orton has no business appearing on that card. You want to maybe do the backstage vignette where he just has to sort of lie on the ground? I'll give you that one. Because he doesn't really have to do much. Exert anything. Just has to look beaten. And that's it. But Randy Orton putting anybody in an RKO? Something here we're not being told. And I don't like it. I don't want anybody putting their health in jeopardy for my entertainment. These guys need to take care of themselves. We know a lot more now than we have ever in the past, and even then it's not enough. And as a result, if Randy Orton's not supposed to wrestle, then Randy Orton shouldn't be wrestling. Randy Orton should have a night off. 2 nights off. 3 nights off. 2 weeks off. A month off. Whatever it takes for Randy Orton to once again get better. And come back from sort of the irresponsible decision for him to take those elbows to the head in the first place at SummerSlam. So once again, just confusing moments that I think further led to me really not buying in on what Backlash was selling to me. I also thought the tag team setup was a little bit head-scratching and how that developed. Now, early on, you had the second chance semifinals with the Usos taking on the Hype Bros. The idea that the Usos had eliminated American Alpha from their chance in the finals to compete for the titles. And as a result, with Heath Slater and Rhino not having an opponent, rather than just having them take a bye into the finals and be crowned their championship, even though that's how it would normally work, the decision was made by the heads of SmackDown, Tanya Bryan and Shane McMahon, to have both eliminated semi-final teams compete against one another for a second chance to get into the finals. So basically a double elimination of sorts for these two teams. Now I'm digging the Usos and their new not giving a shit attitude. Ditch the face paint. Much more all about them in their walk to the ring. Got rid of sort of the Samoan chant at the beginning. Desperately need some new entrance music, though, to go along with the new attitude. The old stuff just isn't going to cut it with what they're trying to pull off now. But as we moved in, you knew that this was going to be the Usos over the Hype Bros. And it was. A fine match. I don't think people were into it because it sort of felt inevitable. Usos sort of roll out a new finishing tandem similar to the moveset they used to take out Chad Gable on SmackDown weeks back. Or actually this week. Last week, rather, to be perfectly specific. And so it sets up a finals match between the Usos and Heath Slater and Rhino. Now, I thought there was a pretty obvious way for this to go. Predictability here not necessarily being a problem because I think it fed into the story that had already been told as well as the story to come, which is the Usos using their vicious means to get a second chance at the tag team championships, to establish themselves as a heel tag team that will do whatever it takes to win, and to further set up American Alpha once again as a sympathetic babyface tag team on a quest for vengeance and justice. A team that had been wrong, had been cheated out of their rightful spot in the finals for the tag team titles. A team on the rise who had now succumbed to the veterans who felt threatened with their spot on the roster. A number of ways you can go with this. Another number of different layers into that very simple setup. And by having the Usos really unfairly perhaps capture the first ever SmackDown tag team titles, you've now set up a feud instantaneously between them and American Alpha for those titles once Chad Gable is ready to be put back into action. Now, the other way you could also go with this in addition to building the heat on the Usos with their new heel turn, is by having maybe Jason Jordan interject himself into this match to ratchet up that rivalry between those two. Add another layer of stakes by having the Usos get their comeuppance in their unfair ascent to the finals of the tournament, allowing Heath Slater and Rhino to capture the titles that way. So either way, you could either double down with the Usos as your newly established heel tag team by not only eliminating American Alpha, but also denying the fans the opportunity to see Slater and Rhino be crowned champions, and denying Heath Slater the contract he had been promised if he won the tournament. And with Heath Slater rapidly becoming a fan favorite who the universe is rallying behind, that once again lends heat to the Usos. WWE Creative elected to go neither of those logical paths, and instead opted for Heath Slater and Rhino to score clean wins, clean victory over the Usos, giving the crowd a hard pop for the new champions. Something I never thought I'd see as a WWE fan in any immediate future, which is seeing the WWE Universe pop hard for Heath Slater winning a title in the WWE. But once again, this just goes to show you give a guy time, put some effort behind him, and telling a story about him, and people will rally to it. They see a guy who's still got passion, even when his storyline is ridiculous. They'll root for him. But I thought the head-scratching part here was that, how does this help the Usos get back over as heels? If they were cutthroat against American Alpha and then cutthroat against the Hype Bros, then they falter against Heath Slater and Rhino, then everything they did leading up to that moment is null and void. In this case, if the cheaters don't prosper, then what was the point of all the cheating? I mean, I feel great for Heath Slater. He's worked really hard. I think the sole remaining member of the Nexus in the WWE Universe right now. He's come a long way. But I just don't know where you go from here. Because there's nothing for Heath Slater and Rhino scoring a clean win over the Usos at the end. There's nothing for them going forward. You have the Usos mad that they lost, but they lost fair and square. And with American Alpha not taking their opportunity to maybe even the sides of screwedness against the Usos, everything is just feels like it lacks purpose or direction. So once again, just another creative decision I have a tough time making the heads or tails of. You know, one other match on the main card between Dolph Ziggler and The Miz for the Intercontinental title. I thought you had a strong build here, once again, with Dolph Ziggler doubling down on this idea that The Miz is a coward and a soft wrestler. Really solid interaction between The Miz and Daniel Bryan beforehand, which I'm glad to see them ratcheting up again, even if they may have missed their window to really drive it home. Dolph Ziggler, for me, one of the top sellers in the business as far as making his opponent look good at all times. Made The Miz look good. His offense look good as he took a beating. The Miz now with some edge, some viciousness put forth as he takes his character to another level that it hadn't been before. Not crazy about Dolph Ziggler getting sort of 2 championship opportunities on back-to-back pay-per-views. Once against the WWE champion at SummerSlam, now against the Intercontinental champion at Backlash because I feel like he just needs to be reestablished as a guy that the fans can believe in. The fans always want to believe in Dolph Ziggler, and yet the rug is just always pulled out from under them anytime he gets these opportunities. So I think you need to rebuild him as a guy who is on the ascent. Maybe take that Sami Zayn NXT approach as a guy who was good or was great, sort of fell back down to good and now needs to re-find his form to greatness again. Because right now, Dolph Ziggler, I mean, it's just like beating a dead horse. Like, we get it. He's never going to win. He'll win when it's not meaningful. When it is meaningful, we know that it's not the case. So once again, because they haven't... look, they made leaps and bounds in trying to reestablish him as a credible contender for the WWE title at SummerSlam. Brooklyn crowd necessarily didn't buy in, but I thought in the weeks leading up to that pay-per-view, they did a real solid job of trying to mitigate the damage they had created with Dolph Ziggler over the years. But by putting him into an IC title match, here, where the odds were he was probably going to falter again, I don't know that it really does anything to sort of rebuild the legitimacy of Dolph Ziggler. Now, even with The Miz scoring a cheap win at the end, which I loved, Maurice goes full 80s heel manager by spraying something in Dolph Ziggler's eyes and blinding him and allowing The Miz to score a victory. I love it. I love Maurice having an active ringside presence. As I was watching this match, I said to myself, Maurice really needs to get more involved in The Miz's matches. Maurice really needs to sort of impose herself in a sensational Sherry type of way to help get The Miz further over as a heel. Not that he's not over already, but to take it up another notch. Slaps to the face when a guy's draped on the ropes. When he's laying on the apron, maybe nails to the eyes. Something as The Miz distracts the referee to further get the crowd alive and rooting for the babyface in those matches. And so I thought the spray to the eyes sort of came out of nowhere. I wish they would have done a little bit more with Maurice in leading up to this match, but also in this match for that interaction to make a little bit more sense. I felt nostalgic watching it happen. I'd like to see more of it. I like The Miz retaining the title. It would have made more sense for it to be at the expense of somebody else other than Dolph Ziggler, who I really think needs a reboot to get him back up the card. Because I think right now I think SmackDown has too many guys whose reputations have been tarnished too much that the fans just don't believe in them right now. And I think that's where we're at right now. Bray Wyatt is a guy that people don't believe in right now. Dolph Ziggler is a guy people don't believe in right now. And you got to get people believing in your talent once again. In order to really capitalize on the depth that you have. You want a number of people who can main event a SmackDown pay-per-view. It can't just be limited to Dean Ambrose, AJ Styles, and John Cena. And Randy Orton, probably. You need more than 4. We used to have the SmackDown 6 once upon a time. I think you need 6, maybe 8 interchangeable pieces who could square off against one another at any time in the main event of a SmackDown show. Dolph Ziggler, I think, can be one of those guys. Bray Wyatt, I think, can be one of those guys. The Miz, I think, can be one of those guys. But you got to build them up the right way, or it's not going to work. People aren't going to buy in and believe, and that's what you need, suspension of disbelief. If you want people to think that they can be right up there in the mix for a main event, they will pay money to watch and spend time to see. Kickoff also had one pretty solid match. That was Apollo Crews versus Baron Corbin. I wish that match actually would have been put on the main card, as the main card ended rather early. I think went off the air about 10:38. Pretty early for WWE pay-per-view on the WWE network. I understand you want to do something early, give something away on the pre-show to maybe pique people's interest, get them buying into the network, paying their $9.99 a month if they haven't already. But if you're going to put a really strong match on, add it to the main card, because I think it'd help break up some of the flow here. Maybe get people some excitement for a match that was pretty solid. So Baron Corbin scores the victory over Apollo Crews, who I thought put on a really good match. Not still sold on his persona. I think there needs to be work there. And once again, Baron Corbin, another one of those guys that could be in the main event picture if you build him up right. But guess what? Sticking him on the pre-show makes him feel unimportant. And that doesn't do anything for the long-term value. You need long-term value for these guys. Every decision needs to be made about how does it alter their perception positively for long-term value. I don't think enough of those decisions are being made right now. So as a result, SmackDown I thought was okay. Backlash I thought was okay. It was fine. Styles Ambrose I thought was a pretty good match. Women's Challenge match I thought was really solid. Everything in between, not crazy about. Ziggler and The Miz I thought was fine. I liked the ending. The tag title stuff I thought was just alright. Just lacking some sort of fire there, some intensity. And the Randy Orton, Bray Wyatt stuff was just a head scratcher. You know, SmackDown is still behind the 8 ball as opposed to its competition with Monday Night Raw, which I think is being given all the benefits, all the advantages. So as a result, the only way that SmackDown is going to work is to take a lot of huge risks. Take some chances. Not be so by the book. And that's what will get people to take notice. Be innovative. Be creative. I think AJ Styles as your WWE World Champion is a start. But you got to figure out how to make that work throughout the rest of the card. Give people something exciting to watch, something compelling to watch all the time. From top to bottom. Then you'll get something that will generate some sort of excitement. Which I thought was just terribly lacking in this year's Backlash. So mixed thoughts for me on the card. Really happy for AJ Styles. Really happy for Becky Lynch. Really happy for Heath Slater. Everything else left me just wanting more. Or rather, wanting something else. Something a little bit better. So with that said, those are my thoughts on Backlash on this very special Backlash edition of Intelligent Wrestling Conversation. I want to thank you for making your way to this breakdown of the first ever SmackDown distinct event following the brand split in the WWE. We'll be back later in the week to talk more wrestling action, particularly the fallout from Backlash on SmackDown, as well as the build towards Clash of Champions on Monday Night Raw. Talk about CM Punk's debut in the UFC. The Leader Decay over in TNA. Also talk about what's going on with Alberto Del Rio and Paige in the WWE. So a lot of other things to break down. We'll get to that later in the week, so make sure you tune in to the upcoming episode of Intelligent Wrestling Conversation, which you'll get also this week, just in due time. So with that said, make sure you hit up all our social media accounts while you're at it, at The IWC Show on Twitter. That's The IWC Show on Twitter for all wrestling news that we want you to be informed about, as well as we'll let you know anytime a new podcast comes up. So at The IWC Show on Twitter, make sure you follow that. At Tiz Infamous, that's T-I-S Infamous, Tiz Infamous for our mothership. This is Infamous. That's the home base of Intelligent Wrestling Conversation, so make sure you follow there for all our awesome content that goes up. at Tis Infamous on Twitter. And for myself, for all my random ramblings and musings, my stream of consciousness put into the written word in 140 characters or less, at Infamous Kid. That's Kidd, at Infamous Kid on Twitter, for all of my personal needs to be entertained by whatever it is comes out of my face in tweet form. Facebook, 2 pages to like, facebook.com/tisinfamous, facebook.com/BillyTheKid. Always really interesting discussion threads for you to take part in over there, so participate, like those 2 pages, and get yourself involved. Podcasts can be found wherever podcasts can be found, so I know you found us for this particular episode, but whatever your preferred method of getting podcasts is, you can find Intelligent Wrestling Conversation there as well. So iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Blueberry, SoundCloud. Just do a search for Intelligent Wrestling Conversation. It'll come up. We ask that you subscribe to the show so it's delivered to your device every time a brand new episode comes out. You'll never miss a beat with a subscription, and they're free. So just click on the button and you'll get it to your phone or tablet every single time. Also, just make sure that you rate the show. So let us know what a good job we're doing. 5 stars. Greatly appreciated. 1 star, just keep that one to yourself. And if you comment, that's also a big deal too. So if you just take a couple moments to jot down a few words and let other people know how awesome the show is, that goes a long way as well. So subscribe, rate, and comment. Just take a couple minutes. I'll greatly appreciate it. And I'll give you a high five next time we see each other. Or at least sort of a make-believe high five right now from me to you. If you take care of that. Bang, right there. There you go. Good job. Look, if you want to send an email to me, you got some comments, some feedback, some questions, send it to theiwcshow@gmail.com. That's theiwcshow@gmail.com. Read all your emails personally, and if you bring up a good point or a good question, may make it onto the show. So make sure you leave your name and where you're from so that you can be properly credited for that. Follow my work on a regular basis at thisisinfamous.com. So whether it's written, audio, or video, you can find some good stuff always up at thisisinfamous.com. So be sure to find me there. I've been your host, Billy Donnelly. This has been Intelligent Wrestling Conversation. I'll be back next week. Actually, that's not true. I'll be back later this week talking more wrestling. Not about Backlash, but about some other stuff. So just stay tuned. Keep an eye out. In the meantime, have yourself a pleasant, immediate future, because I'm out for now. Peace. Intelligent Wrestling Conversation has been a podcast presentation of This Is Infamous.